Hello, let me make the sound a little larger. Today we are talking about such topic as your boss and you. And this is the second part of our lecture. I'm sure when you were listening the first part, you were comparing what you were hearing with your boss. And I'm sure you have found some explanations of why your boss behaves the way he or she does. And I hope you are starting to understand your boss better. And you are starting to understand how to manage your relationships with your boss better. So let's continue our discussion. Let me share my screen. The next thing that I'd like us to remember is the following. Leaders feel lonely too. See, the distance created by power not only changes the degree others trust their leaders, but also the degree that power holders trust others, which very often is a significantly reduced trust. And this leads to leaders feeling more distant and lonely. See, top managers, for example, or managers feel that they need to be alert constantly. So there is no, such thing as innocent conversation. Very often they feel that, they need to put on some performance and that everyone wants something from them. And this is why they often feel, I should say, even tired and on edge. Leaders often report a sense of alienation and loneliness as a hardship they need to deal with at work. And this is a big challenge for leaders. They experience significant stress because of work, but they are less connected to others and they trust others less, which may intensify stress. We also need to remember that the effect of power on different individuals is different. The degree an individual is affected by power depends on this person's character to a big degree. Depends on who this person is and the situation they are in. See, when the person gets to the position of power, the person brings to this position who he or she is. And then the power affects this person, but it is different for different people. And this is where this view, different views, power as a responsibility and power as opportunity actually comes from. Culture, national culture, plays a role to some degree too. For example, an interesting study tells about an experiment where leaders from individualistic countries were simply shown a word power and written on a paper. And after they saw this word, they were shown sheets of papers with very many different words written on them. So those leaders responded more quickly to reward-related words. So when they saw the word power, they immediately thought in terms of rewards. And then the same procedure, the same process was implemented with the leaders in collectivist countries. It was interesting that when those leaders saw the word power, they were significantly quicker to notice responsibility-related words out of very many words which they saw on different sheets of paper. It sounds quite interesting, isn't it? Doesn't it? Well, let's talk about effects of power. The effects of power that your boss is under. There are actually 5 of them. We talked about them earlier in our lectures, so let's summarize this knowledge which you already have. So, the 5 effects of power. First of all, more disinhibited behavior. See, power leads people to have less self-control. They become disinhibited. Power holders tend to suppress their feelings significantly less than other people. They're more likely to act on their feelings than other people. For example, if people in a group are laughing, the entire group of people is laughing about something. The person who laughs louder and more dominantly probably is the one with more power in the group. This is how you can actually distinguish who has more power in a group. At the same time, I need to say that if the goal of the power holder is to reach their goal by acting in controlled and inhibited manner, they will do it. They will use more self-control than less powerful people. So everything depends on the goal of the power holder. Another effect of the person of power on the person is they are characterized by more instinctive decisions and actions. See, individuals with power rely more on their own knowledge, memories, ideas, thoughts, which can be easily retrieved, from the top of the head. And such individuals act more instinctively. They rely more on their gut feelings when they make decisions. For example, a leader may use information which is easily noticed while making hiring decisions in the organization. You will be surprised by, according to research, it is so. Often it happens that leaders tend to pay more attention to what someone is wearing for a job interview, which is easily noticeable information, than less noticeable but more job-related information. Sounds interesting. Another effect of power is the following. Power holders allow themselves to be themselves much more than those people with less power. See, power holders believe that they have control over important issues and that they do not need help of others, that they are not dependent on others. Thus, they allow themselves to act on how they really feel. They're less likely to adapt how they, actually feel, and they're less likely to adapt how they express their feelings in different situations. For example, high status people do not adapt how they laugh in different contexts with different audiences, while lower power people do this. Power holders are more consistent in how they behave. They simply don't see the need to adapt their behavior according to the situation. Here is an example. An interesting study videotaped people working together. And those people working together, there was someone who was fulfilling the role of a boss and someone who was fulfilling the role of subordinates. Then those videos were shown to other people who were asked to rank consistency of behavior of the videotaped individuals. without explanation, who had more or less power. So powerful individuals were rated as behaving significantly more consistently. Power holders are more guided by their beliefs. When they decide how to act, then they're guided by situational factors. Once again, they pay attention to what they know, believe, then to the context. And this is really important. Please remember this. Power holders tend to adhere to rule-based principle when evaluating another person's behavior, even when they themselves do not follow these rules. At the same time, those with less power think more in terms of positive, negative intentions and positive, negative, practical impact. Power holders often, apply principles, rules, standards to others, but not to themselves. And power holders often feel morally superior in comparison with others. So when you're listening to all this, do you think it resembles your boss to some degree? Does it remind you your boss to some degree? Power holders set more selfish goals and are more principled. Power holders are more influenced by the most outstanding, obvious, and easily accessible information, feelings, and ideas. And very often, this is true for their goals as well. This means they focus on prominent organizational goals. It can also mean that they focus on immediate and short-term goals. For example, they can focus on short-term financial outcomes at the expense of longer-term strategic objectives. It can also mean personal goals, including selfish goals. And of course, other people around, especially subordinates, are affected. However, and this is very important, those with power, bosses, power holders, mostly are not aware of the effect all these factors have on people around. Let's mention a few words about self-serving goals of power holders. Let's have a quote from a really good book wrote by McKinley in 2025. Studies show that people who feel powerful are more likely to act in line with their personal preferences. They tend to spend more on themselves when shopping, for example. They're less likely in personal relationships to sacrifice their interests for those of their partners. And they're more likely to view themselves as entitled to rewards, and thus less likely to distribute gains equally with others. This helps explain why 5-year-old children in high-rank position in a group give fewer stickers to other kids who need them for a task, and why CEOs have power over the pay-setting process tend to give themselves significantly higher levels of both cash and total compensation. See, when there are no boundaries, power holders often act up, we can say. Power holders are more likely to pursue self-serving goals when there is not much of accountability, when there are few rules and regulations, when they have more discretion in their decisions, and when they are confident that their power is stable. This is why it is very important for subordinates to have a strong network to protect themselves from possible negative strikes by their bosses. Power holders are less likely to pursue self-serving goals when they view power as a responsibility, when they have strong pro-social values. And this is a really big plus for everyone to remember. So while you're listening to all this, think about your boss. Important. Power holders are very goal achievement oriented. And there are pluses and minuses here. Pluses are obvious. Concentration on the goal, efficiency in achieving it, and minuses. When they're very focused on their goal, they do not notice many other important things. They're focused on what they want and do not notice the needs and wants of other individuals, of subordinates, of you. Their desire to achieve their goal quickly makes them indifferent to social norms, which, to their mind, may slow them down. See, personalities may clash, and leaders prefer those who are similar to them. This is why your boss may dislike you. Well, let's imagine a situation. A new top manager looks and sounds very confident, with lots of outer confidence. She talks confidently, and all her appearance demonstrates that she knows what she is doing, and that the company will greatly improve under her rule. Her subordinates are happy. Finally, there is a person who is secure in herself to make right and good decisions for the company. However, sometime soon, subordinates start noticing that their boss tends to be a little more directive than necessary, a little too defensive than she should be anytime someone has a question or provides some feedback. She likes only the ideas from others who agree with what she thinks is right. She seems to be too focused on what she knows and does not care what others know. She surrounds herself with employees whom she likes because they support her. Employees in the company have become cautious, not wanting to express any negatives to her. This is why, when something is not working out, and the top manager doesn't know the reason, because people simply do not tell, many good employees have left the company. So what's going on here? In reality, underneath her confident demeanor, there is really an insecure person who is afraid of failing and is desperate to prove herself. You know, such people are driven by the need to be in control, and they are very sensitive to any hint that they may be failing. See, expressing ideas to your boss may be costly. Subordinates copy the boss behavior and treat each other the same way. For example, if a leader over controls, then the leader's direct reports start over control their teams. And this can cascade to the entire company. And now let's pay attention to such important aspect as fear of losing power. Because the fear of losing power may be very strong. Let's have a quote from Nick Kinley book. People with high need for power are more likely to prefer ingratiating and subservient followers who don't threaten their power. They also tend to be quicker to respond to perceived threats to their power and be more likely to respond aggressively to them. How much we want power, enjoy it, or feel like we need it determines how strong our response to any threat to it is likely to be. Well, see, there are three motives for power: dominance. Such people want to control everything and make sure everything goes their way. Prestige. Such people want to be respected and admired as experts in their fields. And leadership. Such people want to influence others and to put everyone together to achieve shared goals for everyone's benefits. And now let's talk about responses to threats of losing power. So once again, the fear of losing power may be very strong. People with a high need for power are more likely, as I said, to prefer irritating and subservient followers who don't threaten their power. They also tend to be quicker to respond to perceived threats to their power and be more likely to respond aggressively to them. How much we want power, enjoy it, or feel like we need it determines how strong our response to any threat to it may be. See, the primary goal when a power holder feels threatened is not to do what is best for the organization. Please pay attention to this. The primary goal when a power holder feels threatened is not to do what is best for the organization. It is to remove threat. They may still care about others, but at this point, this is not their urgent concern. Their urgent concern is to keep their power, to preserve their power, to preserve their position. And they may do it at the cost of putting aside their subordinates. And this happens even with many excellent leaders, not even speaking about bad ones. A leader who is generally, a good leader and a supportive leader may become selfish and self-protective when they feel that their power and their position is at risk. The way how they respond to such a threat may be more civil than a response of a dominant leader. However, there will be some actions which probably and most probably will negatively affect others. So please pay attention to this. Anytime a power holder feels that there is a threat to him or her losing power, they will act. And usually those who will pay for their action are their subordinates. And this most probably will negatively affect subordinates. There are 7 responses to threats of losing power. The first one is rigid control. Control of processes, of how things are done. Information flow is restricted by the power holder who chooses what information to share and when. Top-down leadership, do not listen to advice, are not willing to change directions, desire to control and to have control and stability. This is the rigid control as a response to the threat of losing power. Another response to the threat of losing power is defensive dominance. This is tendency to fight back, to aggressively reassert power, intimidation of subordinates, establishment oneself as the one in charge, expression of anger, personal attacks, bullying. Everything is done to dominate the situation. Direct action towards the perceived threat, authoritarianism, demand for personal loyalty. So this is defensive dominance as one of the responses to the threat of losing power. Another one is prioritizing personal goals. Prioritizing self-serving outcomes instead of others' interests and welfare. For example, trying to maintain control, such a leader could withhold important information or exclude group members whom the power holder sees as a threat, although these group members can be crucial for the group's well-being. Another type of response to the threat of losing power is preserving personal image as a company at the cost of undermining subordinates or at the cost of negative effect on subordinates. So the power holder does not care about subordinates. So preserving personal image in the company, preserving personal image is number one. How it negatively affects subordinates, they don't care. Another type of response is risk aversion, paranoia, and holding on too tight. See, these are 7 responses to threats of losing power, and these responses may be calculated and deliberate, or they may be unconscious. They may be either way, but please remember this, that these responses, that your boss can be characterized by these responses. Your boss may be a nice boss, a good boss, but when there is a threat of losing power, these responses, all of them or one of them, may actually apply. So please pay attention to this. And this is why it is really important for you to have a strong network. Another thing that I'd like you to remember as we are completing our discussion today is that it is actually hard to be a leader. Leaders have a great pressure to deliver results. There is more intense work, of course. They have high workload, long hours of work, a greater complexity and uncertainty. This situation increases stress and adds security. It reduces self-control and self-awareness, making an average leader worse and worse and worse. Why? Because self-control is what helps the person to minimize the negative effects of power. But with the reduction of stress control or self-control, the person is under the full influence of negative effects of power. In our lectures, in our two parts of the lecture today, we have described many distinguishing features of bosses. So have you noticed some features of your boss? The question is, can you use this information to help you build your career better, to help you understand your boss better, to help you predict your boss better? Please watch this lecture once again, listen to this lecture once again, and think about it really carefully. Pay attention to many important facts that we have discussed today. This may really help you to develop your career better, to know how to deal with those with power, and, which is very important, to become a really great power holder when you get to the position of power, when you get to the position of higher power, so that everyone will win, you, and your organization. I hope this lecture was helpful to you. Thank you for paying attention. And now I wish you to have a good day. Goodbye.